This is the sort of a princess that gallivants around, thinking that she's above the petty people of her town because she is the most beautiful maiden and the only child of the king of Umueze. But one day, her ego was challenged by a mere low-life village carpenter who doesn't see her as a god. Please, I would like you to do me a favor. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos. Now, let's dive into the story. The red dust of the market square rose in a choking cloud as the heavy clay water pot smashed against the hard earth. The sound was not just a crack, it was a violent explosion that silenced the chatter of 500 villagers in an instant. Chickens flapped their wings in panic, scurrying under the bamboo tables, and the goats tethered to the iroko trees bleated in alarm. But the human silence was the loudest of all. Every eye in the Umueze market turned to the center of the chaos, where Princess Adana stood with her chest heaving and her eyes blazing like hot coals. She looked out of place among the dusty traders. Her wrapper was made of the finest imported velvet, deep crimson like fresh blood, and her neck was heavy with layers of coral beads that clicked together as she breathed. Her skin was oiled and glowing, untouched by the harsh sun that baked the skin of the commoners. At her feet lay the shattered remains of the pot, the water turning the red dust into blood-colored mud. "Do you not have ears?" Adana screamed, her voice tearing through the humid air. "I said move! I am the daughter of the Eze. I am the beauty of the rising sun, and you block my path with this filth?" The old woman, Mama Nene, was shaking like a leaf in a harmattan wind. She was a grandmother to half the village, a woman whose back was bent from years of farming cocoyam to feed her grandchildren. "My princess," she stammered, pressing her forehead into the dirt. "I am sorry. The path is narrow and my legs are slow. I did not mean to offend." "Your slowness is an insult." Adana kicked a shard of the broken pottery towards the old woman's face. Mama Nene flinched, covering her head with her calloused hands. "Guards, overturn this stall. Scatter her yams. Let everyone see what happens when you disrespect royalty." The two royal guards standing behind Adana exchanged uneasy looks. They held heavy wooden staffs and their chests were bare, glistening with sweat. They knew their duty was to obey, but this was Mama Nene. She had given them roasted corn when they were children, running naked in the rain. "Did you not hear me?" Adana shrieked, spinning around to slap the nearest guard across the face. The sound echoed, sharp and stinging. "Do it now, or I will tell my father to feed you to the crocodiles in the forbidden river." The guard clutched his cheek, shame burning in his eyes. Reluctantly, he stepped forward, raising his boot to kick the wooden supports of the old woman's table. The villagers watched in horror, their hands over their mouths. No one dared to speak. The king's daughter was known for her wickedness, and the king's power was absolute. Just as the guard's foot was about to connect with the table, a hand shot out from the crowd. It was a large hand, rough and stained with the dark sap of trees. It gripped the guard's ankle mid-air, stopping the kick with the strength of a python coiling around its prey. The market gasped. Time seemed to freeze. "That is enough," a voice said. It was not a shout, but a deep rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Adana froze. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. A young man stepped out from the circle of terrified villagers. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his simple tunic made of rough woven cotton. He wore no sandals, and his trousers were frayed at the hems. He was Obina, the village woodcarver, known for his silence and the magical things he created with his chisel. But today, he did not look like a quiet artist. He looked like a storm gathering on the horizon. He released the guard's leg and shoved him back gently but firmly. Then he walked past the guards, past the furious princess, and knelt beside Mama Nene. He helped her stand, dusting the dirt from her faded wrapper with a tenderness that made the women in the crowd tear up. "Who are you?" Adana whispered, her voice dangerous and low. She was shaking with a rage she had never felt before. No one ignored her. No one. Obina did not look at her. He picked up a whole yam from the dust and placed it back on the table. Only then did he turn to face her. His eyes were dark, calm, and utterly unimpressed. I am a man who was taught that you do not kick a mother, and you, little girl, are acting like a goat that has eaten bad grass." The insult hung in the air. The crowd drew a sharp breath. He had called the princess a goat, a little girl. "Do you know who I am?" Adana screamed, stepping forward until she was inches from his chest. She had to look up to meet his eyes. "I am Princess Adana. Men cross 7 rivers just to glimpse my shadow. I can have your head cut off and mounted on the palace gate before the sun sets." Obina looked down at her. He didn't blink. He didn't tremble. He actually smiled, a small, pitying smile that was worse than a slap. "I know who you are. You are a beautiful fruit that is rotting on the inside. You wear gold, but your spirit is made of mud. What is the use of being a princess if you have no manners?" "Manners?" Adana laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "I do not need manners. I have power. I own you. I own this market. I own the air you breathe." "You own nothing," Obina countered, his voice rising just enough so everyone could hear. "Respect is earned, Adana. It is not inherited. Right now, the only thing you have earned is the pity of your people. Look at them." He swept his hand toward the crowd. "They do not bow because they love you. They bow because they are afraid you will hurt them. That is the way of a beast, not a queen." "I will kill you!" Adana lunged at him, her nails curved like claws, aiming for his face. Obina caught her wrists effortlessly. He held her there, her struggling useless against his worker's strength. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver down her spine, a shiver she told herself was hate. "Go and learn some manners, my princess," he said, staring deep into her eyes. "Until you learn that every person in this village is a human being, do not speak to me." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling back. She almost fell, catching herself at the last moment. Her beautiful wrapper was twisted, her dignity in tatters. "Guards!" she shrieked, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. "Seize him! Drag him to the palace! I want him to suffer!" The guards moved forward, but the crowd shifted. Men with machetes at their waists stepped closer to Obina. The market women picked up heavy stones. The mood had changed. The people were tired, and Obina had given them a spark of courage. "We will go to the palace," Obina said, raising his hands to calm the crowd. "I will walk there myself. I have no fear of the king. He is a wise man, unlike his daughter." He turned and began to walk toward the great gate of the Eze's compound, his head held high. Adana stood panting in the dust, watching his broad back. Her heart was pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She hated him. She hated him more than anything in the world. But as she watched him walk away, she realized with a jolt that it was the first time a man had ever looked at her without want, and the first time a man had ever told her the truth. The king's obi was a large circular chamber with a high thatched roof supported by massive carved pillars. King Eze Olo sat on his throne, covered in leopard skins, his face grave. The council of elders sat in a semicircle, their feathered fans waving slowly in the heat. Adana was on her knees, sobbing dramatically. "He touched me, Papa. He grabbed my hand. He called me a goat. He said I was rotten." The king looked at his daughter. He loved her, but he was not blind. He had heard the whispers. He had paid for the broken pots and the ruined stalls many times before. He looked at Obina, who stood in the center of the room, flanked by guards, looking calm and respectful. "Obina, son of the late Kava Ikechukwu," the king said, his voice deep and weary. "Is it true? Did you lay hands on the princess?" "I stopped her hands from doing evil, Igwe," Obina replied, bowing low. "She was about to destroy the livelihood of Mama Nene. I merely held her back. And yes, I told her she lacked manners. For that, I apologize to the throne, but I do not apologize for the truth." "He admits it," Adana cried, jumping up. "Cut off his hands. Ban him to the evil forest." The king raised his staff, demanding silence. He looked at Adana, really looked at her. He saw the beautiful clothes, the jewelry, and the ugly snare on her face. He realized he had created this monster by never saying no. "Adana," the king said softly, "you destroyed a grandmother's stall?" "She was in my way," Adana snapped. The king closed his eyes for a moment.
When he opened them, they were hard. "I have made a decision." Adana smirked at Obina. "Goodbye, carpenter." "Obina," the king said, "you say my daughter needs to learn manners. You say she does not understand the value of work or people." "Yes, Igwe." "And Adana, you say Obina is a nobody who needs to be punished." "Yes, Papa." "Good, then the punishment shall fit the crime. For the next 7 market weeks, Obina, you will not be punished. Instead, you will repair everything Adana has ever destroyed in the market. And Adana?" Adana froze. "Yes, Papa." "You will help him." The silence in the Obi was absolute. "What?" Adana whispered. "You will go to Obina's hut at sunrise every day. You will not wear your silks, you will not wear your beads. You will wear the plain cloth of a servant. You will learn to sand the wood, to mix the clay, to weave the thatch. You will walk until Obina says the day is done. If you refuse, I will strip you of your title and send you to live with your aunt in the distant lands where no one knows your name." "You cannot do this," Adana screamed. "I am a princess. I do not work. I do not touch debt." "The king, then you are no daughter of mine. I don't know who you got this words from," the king said, standing up. "The decree is given. Obina, if she is lazy, do not feed her. If she is rude, correct her. She is in your care." The humiliation burned Adana's skin like fire. She looked at Obina, waiting for him to gloat, but he didn't. He just nodded at the king, then turned his dark eyes to her. "Be at my hut when the rooster crows, princess, and wear something you don't mind getting dirty." The first 3 days were a war. Adana arrived late on purpose, wearing a sour expression and dragging her feet. Obina lived on the edge of the village, near the river, in a compound that was filled with logs of ebony, mahogany, and iroko. It smelled of sawdust and wood smoke. "You are late," Obina said, not looking up from the stool he was carving. "I am a princess. Time waits for me," she hissed. "The sun does not wait for you," Obina replied. "Grab that rough leaf. We need to smooth this log." "I will not." She crossed her arms and sat on a clean log. "I will sit here until sunset and then go home." "Suit yourself," Obina shrugged. "But the king said you must help. If you don't work, you don't eat." By midday, the smell of roasting yam and spicy goat pepper soup wafted from the fire pit behind the hut. Adana's stomach roared. She hadn't eaten breakfast in her anger. She watched Obina eat, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He didn't offer her a crumb. "You are a wicked man," she muttered, her throat dry. "And you are a stubborn girl," he chewed slowly. "The leaf is over there. The wood is waiting." With tears of rage in her eyes, Adana picked up the rough sanding leaf. She rubbed it against the wood aggressively. "Gently," Obina commanded, standing over her. "You are not fighting the wood. You are talking to it. If you fight it, it will give you splinters. If you respect it, it will become smooth." "I don't care about this stupid wood," she yelled. "That is why you are unhappy," he said quietly. "You fight everything. The world, the people, yourself. Try just being." He took her hand, his rough palm against her soft skin, and guided her motion, back and forth, rhythmically. Adana stiffened at his touch, her breath hitching. He was close. She could smell the earth and rain on him. He wasn't wearing the perfumes of the courtmen, but he smelled good, real. "Like this," he whispered, his voice vibrating in his chest near her ear. She snatched her hand away. "I can do it myself." But she didn't stop sanding, and when she finished the log, hours later, and ran her hand over the smooth surface, she felt a strange, tiny spark of pride. She had done that. The turning point came on the 5th day. Obina needed special wood from the forest, a dense jungle beyond the river where the trees grew tall and ancient. The villagers feared it, but Obina said the best spirits lived in the wood there. They walked in silence. The canopy above was thick, blocking out the sun. The air was cool and filled with the sounds of strange birds and chirping crickets. "Why do you live alone?" Adana asked suddenly. She was walking behind him, struggling to keep up in the thick undergrowth. Obina hacked a vine with his machete. Because it is peaceful, and because I have not found a woman who understands that silence is not empty. You mean you cannot find a woman who can tolerate your rudeness? Adana shot back. Obina chuckled. Perhaps, or perhaps I am waiting for a woman who has fire in her spirit but knows when to let it warm the house instead of burning it down like the goat I met in the market that almost tried to make another person's life miserable than she ever was. Adana fell silent. Was he talking about her? Or was Obina playing a prank joke on her by insulting her in such a manner? Suddenly, the sky darkened. The wind began to howl, whipping the branches violently. A heavy rain, the kind that floods the riverbanks in minutes, began to fall. "We need to go back," Adana shouted over the wind. She was terrified of storms. In the palace, she would hide under her wrapper. "It's too far," Obina yelled, grabbing her hand. "There's a cave nearby. Run!" They ran through the mud, the rain blinding them. Adana slipped on a wet root. She cried out as her ankle twisted, sending a sharp pain shooting up her leg. She tumbled down a muddy slope, sliding toward the rushing riverbank. "Adana!" Obina's voice was filled with panic. He didn't hesitate. He threw his machete aside and slid down the mud after her. Just as she was about to slip into the raging brown water, he grabbed her waist. He hauled her up against him, his arms locking around him like iron bands. He carried her, limping under her weight, fighting the mud and the wind until they reached the small cave opening. He collapsed inside, panting, with Adana safe in his lap. They sat there in the dim light, soaking wet, their chests heaving. Adana was shaking, her teeth chattering from cold and shock. "Are you hurt?" Obina asked, his voice rough with concern. He gently touched her ankle. Adana winced, but she was looking at his face. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, where a branch had struck him. He hadn't even wiped it away. He was only looking at her ankle. You saved me," she whispered. "Why do you hate me?" Obina looked up, his eyes intense and dark as the night outside. He reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "I do not hate you, Adana. I hate the mask you wear. But today I do not see the mask. I just see you." "I am nobody here," Adana said, her voice trembling from cold. "I am just a wet, scared girl with a twisted ankle." "That is enough," Obina said softly. "That girl is real. The princess in the palace is a ghost. This girl, I think I could like this girl." Adana's heart hammered against her ribs. The anger that had fueled her for days was washed away by the rain. In its place was something terrifying and wonderful. She looked at his lips, then his eyes. "You are very insolent, Obina," she breathed, leaning closer. "And you are very troublesome, princess," he murmured. They didn't kiss. The moment was too fragile, too new. But Obina took off his outer tunic and wrapped it around her shoulders. He built a fire, and they sat side by side watching the rain fall. They talked until the moon came out. Adana told him about the loneliness of the palace, how everyone only wanted favors from her. Obina told him about his father and how he carved to remember the stories of the ancestors. For the first time in her life, Adana listened, really listened. By the 7th week, the change in Adana was visible to everyone. She no longer walked with her nose in the air. She greeted the elders. She laughed with the children. Her hands were rougher, her nails short, but her eyes shone with a light that gold could not buy. It was the final day, the day of presentation. The entire village gathered in the square. The king sat on his portable throne, waiting.
Adana and Obina stepped forward. They carried a large object covered in a white cloth. Adana stepped toward Mama Nene. The crowd held its breath. Would the princess scream? Would she curse? Adana knelt. She put her knees in the red dust, right in front of the old woman. "Mama," Adana said, her voice clear and steady. "I was a child walking in darkness. I broke your pot, and I broke the peace of our village. I cannot undo the past, but I have built for the future." She pulled the cloth away. Underneath was a magnificent market stall made of polished mahogany. It was carved with intricate designs of a stall she wanted to build for Mama Nene. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever made by herself. "This is for you," Adana said, "and I will make sure it comes to pass." Mama Nene wept aloud, rushing forward to hug the princess. The crowd erupted into cheers. "Adana! Adana the kind! Adana the wise!" The king stood up, tears in his eyes. He walked over to his daughter and raised her up. "My true daughter," he said. But Adana was looking past the king. She was looking for Obina. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, his work done, turning to head back to his quiet hut. He looked lonely. "Obina!" Adana called out. He stopped. The crowd parted. Adana walked toward him. She didn't march like a tyrant. She walked like a woman who knew what she wanted. She stopped in front of him. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To my wood, princess. The punishment is over. You are free." "Free?" Adana smiled, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "I do not feel free. I feel incomplete." "Oh?" Obina raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. "And what does the princess require to feel complete? More gold? More silk?" "No," she said, stepping closer, ignoring the gasps of the villagers. She took his rough, calloused hand in hers. "I require a teacher, a rude, stubborn, handsome teacher who knows how to keep me in line." Obina laughed, a rich sound that warmed the air. He squeezed her hand. "You know, that teacher is a simple man. He lives in a hut. He eats with his fingers." "Then I will learn to eat with my fingers," Adana declared. "I have learned that a hut with love is better than a palace with silence." She stood on her tiptoes and whispered in his ear, "Now, are you going to just stand there, or are you going to walk me home, Obina?" Obina looked at the king, who gave a slow, approving nod. He looked at the villagers, who were cheering wildly. Then he looked at Adana, the girl who had broken a pot and stolen his heart. "Come, my princess," Obina said, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. "Let us go home." And as they walked together through the red dust of Umweze, the sun setting in a blaze of orange behind them, everyone knew that the rude princess had not just met her match, she had found her soul. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories to come. See you in the next video. Bye!